to the cloud. All right. Hello, everyone. We are live. This is TGI. Welcome. My name is Ridge Cresswell. I am a audio person and apparently lately have been referred to as having a honey voice by one Juan Pablo Mobili. So that's a qualification, right? I can just say that Juan said that about me. It's kind of like a real life blurb that I just have to walk around repeating. At any rate, thank you all for joining us. We are here for I forget how many consecutive weeks in a row. It's been since about March, having missed one show, and this is a reading series devoted to building a sense of community in a time when we are not allowed to really be in the same room, or at least we shouldn't be. Obviously, there are some places where lots of people are all over each other, but we are all being responsible. And as it is a relatively solo endeavor to engage in art, particularly writing, until you get to share it, the pandemic has been really hard for people. You know, we had a couple people just last week who I think at their book launches were messed up by COVID, and obviously things will be disrupted for a while. So as long as this is going on, we intend to stay. And frankly, we've talked a little bit about it, and I think we intend to stay after the fact. Just we might move to like a different night because people want to go out on Fridays again. Without any further ado, I think I said adieu. Anyone who's been coming a lot knows I try not to say adieu. I've been like I have a list of synonyms in my head, and I've had some writers offer me some. Boy, broke it already. We'll see. Anyway, without any more hootenanny, I don't know. I think we should probably just get started. The only things I will mention is the chat is a very fun place to hang out, especially if you, are curious about writer's work, anything like that. You can put your reactions, questions, etc. in the Zoom chat. And then also, if you have further comments, inquiries, or just want to like say hi as we were, just chatting before the show, feel free to hang out a little bit afterwards. We'll probably leave the meeting open for at least about an hour. Sometimes we get carried away and socialize too late, but I think the look I'm seeing from Karina, I believe, indicates that she would like to go to bed soon. Maybe? No? She might come over here and punch me. That's the only hazard of doing this in the same apartment. Okay. Our first reader tonight is Karina Cook. She's the author of Leavetakings, a lyric essay collection published by University of Alaska Press in November. Karina's essays appear in Flyway, Alaska Quarterly Review, Alaska Magazine, and elsewhere. Her freelance journalism appears in Yukon North of Ordinary, and her critical articles appear in Assay and in New Writing. Supported by a 2018-2019 Fulbright Fellowship, a 2018 Alaska Literary Award, and most recently a 2020 Rasmuson Award, Karina's next book project explores the Alaska-Yukon art, ecology, and history. She holds a PhD in English and creative writing from the University of Missouri. Karina, you should be able to unmute yourself and take it away.
Brad, thank you so much. I really appreciate the introduction, and it's super fun to be here with y'all. So I'm Karina Cook. I'm calling in from the traditional territory of the Dena'ina in Anchorage, Alaska. This is my essay collection. It just now came out maybe 3 weeks ago or so, so I'm super happy to celebrate it with this community. I'm going to read from an essay called Fluid Places. This is set in Southeast Alaska on Baranof Island in a town called Sitka. And this is set in winter during one of the odd new winter weather patterns that is emerging in Southeast Alaska that involve these pressure systems and temperature swings from super cold and sunny to way too warm and it dumps rain. So this cycle seems to be somewhat displacing our previous norm of a more steady snowpack kind of building up over the course of the winter that then waters the land as it melts all summer. A verb that you'll hear is to jig. A jig is a kind of a fishing lure, usually with a hook and a sinker, and you pull it up and down vertically. So to go jigging, or in the case of this essay, to jig for squid, means to fish in this way with this kind of a lure. All right, so this is an excerpt from Fluid Places. Uncle Dave and I take a trudge at low tide out at the end of Harbor Point Road. We train our binoculars on seagulls and trumpeter swans, let our toes grow numb. A high pressure system has this mountainous coastline locked in a spell of cold and clear. We can see forever, but it's well below freezing, not much above zero, and the skin of the sea has begun to thicken here and there with rafts of slush. The low sun throws a blinding white across the water and a glare on the barely snow-capped mountains. The black muck of low tide shines, frozen beneath our feet. Sick has got squid now, Uncle Dave tells me. I'm watching a single swan who is head down, bottom up, tail feathers skyward, black feet poised like outriggers. Sitka didn't used to have squid. Now it does. The swan I'm watching makes slight adjustments to its upside down balance. I imagine its snaking white neck curving and jabbing underwater until its flat black bill scooping around in the muck. The young people go up Silver Bay and jig for them, for squid, cut them into pieces and freeze them for bait, says Uncle Dave. Maybe some people just fry them up too, why not? And humpbacks really go in for the squid. Whales are smart. They're not going to pass up a new food source just because it's new. I miss the moment when the swan rights itself. Maybe I blink, jostle the binoculars for no reason. Now it is a classic white boat of swanness, exquisite curve of its too long neck, regal, black bill held high, royalty, no sign of muck scooping. I ask Uncle Dave various disjointed questions, faltering after each. So, where did the squid come from? How big are they? What color? Have you seen them? Who found them? Does Silver Bay like having squid in it? Are they welcome here? The conversation could be going anywhere, just why are there squid? So I'm going to skip forward a few pages and just follow this one thread of the essay. Okay, from later on. I go out Silver Bay, but not to jig. To clamber up Bear Mountain with an old friend who grew up in Sitka, who's in Southeast because he's also visiting family for the holidays. What else can we do when it is clear and snowless? We hike up, 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 steep, 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 mostly trailless, through forest holding to near cliff. We perch at the very top of a huge landslide where we have a line of sight on Mount Edgecombe. It's an island volcano, a mountain topped with a crater rather than a peak. A classic form of volcanic geology, a classic form of Japanese painting. Plunked out in the ocean where it's easy to spot, form unmistakable so it can't be confused for anything it isn't. Its symmetry, a balm to the scattered mind. And of course, no balm at all, for it is a volcano, and no matter how many cherry blossoms the form evokes, a volcano remains a vent through which the earth explodes. We dig our heels into the moss on Bear Mountain and face out toward Mount Edgecombe in the distance. Looking afar permits us to rest by anchoring our balance, which wavers each time we dare glance down, straight down the landslide chute at the wrinkled, glaring skin of Silver Bay, where young people jig for squid. In mathematics, the point at which the vertical axis and the horizontal axis cross one another is called the origin. Here, both x and y equal 0. In other words, the origin is the point from which an action is about to occur, the point from which an idea hovers, about to think. As a student of literature, I learned to differentiate origin stories between oral history, legend, and distant time. Reality was more malleable in distant time than it is now. For example, sometimes distant time orcas dive deep and walk around in human form where they live together in houses. Sometimes the mouse is a grandmother. Sometimes the glacier demands respect, and sometimes a human marries a bear. The rules of present reality aren't set in distant time the way they are now. The woman who marries a bear, for example, makes the best of it and has a family. Because things don't work out for them in the long term, the story marks a pivot point, one of many, in the world becoming as it now is, Humans and bears no longer intermarry, but a complicated kinship persists. The heart of what I learned is that as a body of literature, distant time stories trace the incremental transformation of a far-off, malleable reality into a fixed one, the one in which we presently live, or the one in which we used to live. I'm thinking more and more often about that ancient malleability because it reminds me of the planetary flux of the present, the geochemical tumult of our seas and skies, how the established rules lose traction as deep patterns in the cycle of the seasons break underfoot, leave us walking on fragments, glimpsing familiarity among the pieces. I called the Sitka Fish and Game Office recently. What's with the squid? I asked. Common market squid, I learned. Opalescence. No bag limits or possession limits in place because they're new. Regular sport fish permit will do. And people are indeed jigging for squid in Silver Bay, but don't forget, they're also jigging down at the docks. The squid like the harbor lights. The Sitka Sound Science Center also noticed the squid. Down at the Science Center, they know of a couple trollers keeping track of what they find in the bellies of caught salmon. They also know of a troller who gives salmon stomach sacks to a university professor so she can keep track of what salmon are eating. There's no disagreement, really. There never used to be squid around here. Now there are. So it seems my uncle's basic gesture, watch what the young people are doing, is wise. We just don't know which among the old teachings will buoy us through life, and which practices we'll have to invent as we go, as the world's rhythms shift and tumble underfoot. On the other side of the continent, they talk about a muskrat and a turtle. Back when the world was only ocean, when it was water from horizon to horizon. The world was watery like that for ages until one day the muskrat dove deep, scooped up a ball of mud, and the turtle offered her shell to bear the weight of it. Hence Turtle Island, as North America has been known since then, which gave us something to stand on. Something good and solid so that one day over on this side of the continent, a raven could steal the sun, moon, and stars out of an old man's boxes and toss the first light up into the sky. A muskrat scooped the mud, a turtle held it up, and a raven brought the light. History converged so that now all of us land animals have something to blink about when squid comes swimming up to the surface of Silver Bay on the full moon. Anyway, and I'll finish with this. Anyway, out Harbor Point Road, it was no muskrat. It was a swan, a trumpeter. White feathered ass pointed to heaven, sturdy bill sifting underwater, searching for just the right bottom muck to bring up into the day's blazing cold sun. We don't know yet what it's making, but we linger at the edge of its beach, gathering hints as best we can. Thanks, you guys.
All right, Karina, thank you so much. That was wonderful. I mean, such an interesting blend of ecological concern and also storytelling, right? Like the sort of intersection of that. And I think it's interesting because I've done a lot of thinking myself about like reality and narrative, like not in any sort of academic way, but just because obviously like when you deal with people and their differing beliefs, you start to try to figure out how people are constructing their realities, and it's very disparate. And I think I hadn't thought about the sort of unpredictability of the environment as another factor in that. I mean, obviously we're all aware of it. I mean, I became especially aware of it this year as a bird watcher, seeing things that should have been gone still here in the beginning of November, and we're just in New York City. I mean, the effect on places that are historically covered in ice or historically are bone dry and are getting rain, or vice versa, is obviously much more severe, and the people who are living through it are finding their way. The thing that I thought was really interesting about what you said was this idea of looking to the young people, because I've been talking about this a lot lately. People who are adults now, we were used as technological guinea pigs to some extent, right? Because we got all this technology and all this stuff, but the world's really changing. Now, my question was, maybe just everybody always felt like that. Like kids grow up and the things that are happening when they're kids are what they think has always happened. And then we are all sitting here going, why is everything different now? I don't know. Obviously, none of that's going to matter should we do such damage to the environment that no one can live anymore. Um, I guess the question I would have is, being in Alaska, that's a place that's sort of celebrated for its wilderness. It's really known for that. Is this something that you see people, I guess, interact with more directly, like outside of maybe just the fishing and, fishing industry or hobbies? Like, is this something that seems more on people's radar?
Yeah, absolutely. I come from the 80s. I was
Mhm.
born in the 80s, right? So that means I was born into climate change. I have never lived in a world that was climate stable. I never got to witness that. On the other hand, I did get raised up by people who were born in the 50s. They did witness a climate stable world. That's really interesting, that we live together. And so those are the generations in our communities, so there's my generation, there's generations younger than me, who are all sort of intrigued by what we can learn, from those who remember when things were predictable. And while we're intrigued, we also, we can't spend too much time learning what they have to teach, right? Because the way that berries are growing is different. One of the really serious examples is way far north of where I'm from, but up in the Arctic. Hunting on sea ice
Mm.
is a totally different game this year and this decade than it was a decade ago, much less 2 decades ago, much less 3, 4, 5, 6, right? So it becomes actually very, very dangerous to be mindfully embedded in an ecosystem that, in order to live and thrive in it, um, people have amassed, millennia long, knowledge from so many generations, that's actually sometimes really useful and sometimes falls apart. So that's something I think that everyone lives with across urban Alaska, across rural Alaska. That's a daily fact.
Mm. Yeah, well, that's interesting. So if I'm sure there are essays about other topics in there as well, although I know, ecological stuff is an interest of yours, and an area of study, I think. So Lonely just posted a link to the book in the chat. Everybody, I suggest go check it out. I mean, that the lyric essay thing, I've actually had a really long conversation because I don't have any like training in literature, and we've had very long conversations about it. And all I can tell is that it's essays, for me, essays that have really, really good poetic observation in them. And there were a few lines in there that were incredible. So just from an aesthetic point of view, I really, really enjoyed that. So I just wanted to say that too. I didn't want to just talk about the issues because it's also about presenting the issues in a way that's engaging. And it seems like you've accomplished that. So thank you very much for coming and sharing your work with us.
Well, I really appreciate your listening. Thank you for having me.
Sure. All right. Now I am looking out of the corner of my eye and realizing that Microsoft's digital assistant might start talking again. Yep. Hello. Stop it. All right. Sorry. Our next reader tonight is Ellen Birkett Morris. She's the author of Lost Girls, Short Stories, and Surrender, a poetry chapbook. Her fiction has appeared in Shenandoah, Antioch Review, South Carolina Review, and other journals. She received the Bevel Summers Prize for short fiction. Morris is also a recipient of the Al Smith Fellowship from the Kentucky Arts Council and has an MFA from Queen's University, Charlotte. Ellen, you should be ready to go. You can take it away.
All right. Hi, I'm so glad to be here. I'm coming in from Louisville, Kentucky, and I'm sharing a short story from Lost Girls, which is my short story collection, which came out at the end of June. So it's been an interesting journey trying to get stories into the world and into people's hands when bookstores are closed. But here we are. And I'm going to read you a story called Helter Skelter. My sister Amber told me not to stare at the sun or I'd go blind. She also told me that Beatles song, Helter Skelter, drove some guy crazy and he formed a cult and murdered people. I didn't listen to the radio for a while after that. I still look at the sun, though. I can't help it. It's up there daring me to look at it. My father hardly ever sees the sun. He works night at the Ford plant and sleeps during the day. Sometimes early in the morning, I feel him kiss my forehead. Once I woke up to find him kneeling by the bed, just looking at me and Amber. She slept beside me on her side of the bed, which was 2 inches bigger than my side of the bed. She put blue painter's tape down the middle. When I crossed it, she pinched me. When she was out riding her bike, I measured it. I ride a bike, but not very well. I'm not the athletic type, which is good because if I was, I wouldn't have anyone to play ball with anyway. I hang out with Lucy from down the street. She has glasses and feathered hair. We walk down to the library and buy candy at the convenience store. Amber rides her bike and sometimes rides in cars with boys. She makes me swear not to tell Dad. Every now and then, she'd throw me a bag of candy and say, "For our little secret." I don't believe in secrets. Sooner or later, everything comes out. Like the truth about our mama. Dad said she was killed in an accident, but I saw in the newspaper that her car broke down on the highway and that she stepped out into traffic, right into it. I wonder if the sun got in her eyes and she just couldn't see where she was going. Those things happen. Strange things happen all the time. Like when I saw a girl who looked like Amber smoking in front of Mike's pub. Mike is where the old guys go to sit and drink beer in the afternoon. I pass by there sometimes and glance in. It's dark inside with clouds of cigarette smoke. The television over the bar always has a game on. Old guys are hunched over on stools. Dad quit going to Mike's after Mom died. All he does now is work and sleep. He wakes up in time for dinner, which Amber made from a box, spaghetti from a box, chicken casserole from a box, macaroni and cheese from a box. When she was in a really bad mood, she'd forget to drain the grease off the hamburger before adding it to the noodles. I ate dinner at Lucy's on the days that Amber made meatloaf. Her meatloaf was nasty. Now we have takeout. Mama was a good cook. She'd feed me bits of carrot or jelly beans from a jar as she cooked. She'd dance around the kitchen, and she'd always drain the grease. She hung wind chimes over the kitchen sink, even though there's no wind in the kitchen. She'd run her fingers across the chimes to hear the notes. It was my favorite sound. Now my favorite sound is the theme song to the Flintstones, where you get to meet them and know all about them. I'm pretty sure Amber's favorite sound was a Beatles song, even though they drove that man crazy. Crazy like Jim, who came back from Vietnam with a tattoo of a heart on his palm. He goes up to people on the street and screams, "Look at the sacred bleeding heart of Jesus." I looked, but I didn't see any blood. Sometimes there are spots of blood on our bed sheets when I didn't cut myself. I showed Amber and she told me to shut up. She was so touchy. She hated for me to touch her stuff. I'd play her records and put on her white blouse with the gold threads that ran through it and look through her drawers. In her underwear drawer, I found a map to her secret place in the office park across from the Ford plant. The office park is full of plain white buildings, but in the middle of the parking lot, there's a waterfall. And if you walk past it and follow the path up the hill, there's a small circle of fir trees. Inside the trees, there's a place with logs to sit on. I went there once during the daytime. The ground was covered in beer bottles, and something that looked like the finger of a glove was lying in the dirt. The place looked kind of nasty, if you ask me, which nobody ever does. I woke up in the middle of the night one night, and Amber was gone. I was pretty sure she'd gone to her secret place. I thought about moving the blue painter's tape or spending the rest of the night trying on everything in her closet, but I decided to go and find her instead. I got dressed and put my house key around my neck. I got out my bike and headed for the secret place. Man, was it quiet at night. I passed dark houses and thought of Lucy snuggled under her comforter in her quiet pink bedroom. I thought of Dad working a line at Ford, the air humming with noise. Then I thought about Amber hidden in the pine trees, and wondered what it would feel like to do anything you wanted to do. As I got to the office park, a pink light was spreading in the sky. I leaned my bike against a boulder and started up the path. I could hear sounds above me, breathing, trees shaking, grunts and gasps of air. I ran the rest of the way and into the space between the trees. Some guy had Amber against the tree. Her jeans and panties were around her ankles. Her eyes got really wide when she saw me. I'll go get help, I yelled, and I started running down the path. Jake, get off of me, Amber yelled, and then, Sarah, come back. I ran through the office park and toward the road that separated the park from the Ford plant. Shift change. Cars were leaving the plant parking lot, their drivers eager for a cup of coffee, a drink, or a warm bed. I timed it just right and made it through the traffic and across the street. I looked back to see Amber running after me. She wore her Rolling Stones t-shirt, the one with the tongue on it. She didn't see the car. She was looking at the horizon and the pink morning sun on a bed of clouds. I love the Rolling Stones, who, as far as I know, have never driven anyone crazy. I like their song about clouds. I imagine Amber on her cloud. Other angels come to visit. I bet when she gets tired of them, she says, "Hey, you, get off of my cloud." I hate their song, Paint It Black. It reminds me of the darkness and everything I've ever lost. Stuff that rolled under my bed or just disappeared. When it comes on the radio, I go out in the front yard and look up to the sky. I find the sun and take a good long look until everything goes red and I have to close my eyes. Thanks.
Wow, Ellen, thank you. Very affecting. I think I love there's a way to write from the perspective of children that uses their innocence to tell you more about something than if you had an adult voice telling you what they think is happening, right? And so there's this sense of exploration and the sense of like very literal sort of at times, like and children have a one of the things that makes children in difficult situations so sad, to me at least, is that they're unquestioning. They just accept what's going on because they don't know otherwise, and they make their best guess and they try, but you know that feeling of you know a child referring to neglect or deprivation in some way as just sort of like how things are. Sometimes things aren't great, you know, that kind of like almost, it's not minimalizing in the way adults do where they're like, oh no, I'll be fine, whatever. No, it's just like, no, sometimes things are bad, and there's like an innocence to that is really emotionally effective. And I also think, you know, writing about a loss, a traumatic event, an accident, I inferred, without talking about it is also so effective. So, I mean, I all I can really say is it was such a wonderful way to get into someone's perspective and experience. Yeah, that was, I mean, that was beautiful.
Thank you.
I it was Now, I assume with the title "Lost Girls," is the short stories, are they all sort of in this vein about something maybe negative happening to a young girl?
Well, they're all girls and women, and they all do I have to say they do have a streak of melancholy, I think, that runs through them. But you know, some of the stories are ultimately triumphant, or at least find a way to honor the negative things that happen to the people in the story. So some have a little bit more of an uplift than that one. I thought that one was interesting, though. I mean, just remembering the process of writing it really was a free association kind of thing that I had going there, and you know, picking an image up off of you know, ending a sentence with a word and then picking up with an image from that word and going on from there, and that's how it kind of you know, unwound itself you know, as I was doing it. But yeah, there is, I mean, my cousin's wife said, I don't know how you can ask people to spend money to buy this book and read it when they just are going to get gutted over and over again. So But then, I've had other people say, I mean, there's a mix. There's definitely a mix going on there. Yeah.
Sure. Well, I think something everyone can relate to, whether it's literature, movies, TV, music, etc., is like sometimes, to be honest, it's easier to experience my emotions through a character's loss than it is to sit here and think about my losses. So
Yeah.
I think that kind of emotionally charged and effective writing is important to let people sort of release things from time to time. But I yeah, Sue just said in the chat, we read to feel. Exactly. I mean, that's a perfect way to put it. Like, although some people, obviously, maybe your cousin's wife, I don't know, I've never met her, but some people do read purely to escape or to I don't know. There's all those shelves and shelves of books where like there's a big burly shirtless pirate on the cover, or there's a whole genre of mystery novels that are mysteries solved by cats. So there are things that are out there that are just for people to just have a nice time. But I think getting at the feelings and getting at maybe some of our own experiences and our own perspectives through a character or another person, whether fictional or not, is a really nice thing to do. So anyway, Noli posted a link in the chat, and yeah, for more information, it looks like you can go to ellenbirkettmorris.inc, and everybody go check it out. Thank you so much, Ellen. Really appreciate you coming on.
Thank you.
Sure. All right. We're doing great tonight. That I don't know if I should have said that out loud. That was just a thought. I'm sorry. Now I'm being weird. Okay. Our next reader tonight is Jessica Handler. Jessica is the author of the novel The Magnetic Girl, winner of the 2020 Southern Book Prize and a nominee for the Townsend Prize for Fiction. The novel is one of the 2019 Books All Georgians Should Read, an Indie Next pick, Wall Street Journal Spring 2019 pick, and Bitter Southerner Summer 2019 pick. Oh, and, sorry, I said and too soon, and a Southern Independent Booksellers Association Okra pick. Her memoir, Invisible Sisters, was named one of the Books All Georgians Should Read. And her craft guide, Braving the Fire, a guide to writing about grief and loss, was praised by Vanity Fair magazine. Her writing has appeared on NPR, in Tin House, Drunken Boat, The Bitter Southerner, Electric Literature, Brevity, Creative Nonfiction, Newsweek, and The Washington Post. She teaches creative writing and directs the minor in writing at Oglethorpe University in Atlanta and lectures internationally on writing. Without further falderall, Jessica, you can take it away.
I have no idea who that is in the bio. Ellen, Queens represent, man. That was fabulous. I'm going to read a little bit from the beginning of The Magnetic Girl, and then because this is a New York-based series, although we are coming in from everywhere, but Ridge and Trina are in New York, I'm going to read a part of the book that I don't usually read, which is Taking You to a Dime Museum in Manhattan in 1884. So, because I like me some freak shows. All right, so, and this is a novel about it's my imagined story of the life of a real person who performed on the vaudeville stage for 2 years as a mesmerist, a spiritualist, and perhaps had magnetic power in her fingers. Cedartown, Georgia, October 1883. Objects had always jumped into my pockets, which is why I didn't think of what I did as stealing. Whatever I took from one place to another was merely my attempt to help a lost thing find the right home. A button on the schoolroom floor by the wood stove, the pearly white shine so different from the chapped, dry floor beneath it that the only right thing to do was rescue that smooth disc. A button the size of my fingertip escaped from the tight row of its companions along Ada Scholz's faultless back. Mine now and safe, you little button. This treasure joined my collection inside a wooden box that had at one time held spools of thread. I lined that box with a scrap of brown velvet I'd lifted from beside the scissors at the dry goods store. I kept 3 different glass top hairpins in that box too, along with a playing card that showed a drawing of a mischievous fellow sitting Indian style, waving a heart above his head. I also kept a glass medicine dropper. The rubber bulb was empty now, but still it squeaked when I pinched it. Once in a while, When I held the tip of the medicine dropper to my nose and inhaled, I could smell the bitter ghost of my brother's medicine. My mouth watered when I did, a feeling that could nearly transport me back to a time before everyone forgot me. I helped other things besides the button. An earthworm writhing in the hot dirt, practically calling out to the cool grass that it could not reach. The worm was silent, of course, but I understood how solitary it felt. I crouched and used a twig to lift the anguished creature. The worm lay crosswise over the twig, brownish red flesh struggling in the air for something solid to cling to. Quick, before it fell to the ground and perhaps bruised itself. Could an earthworm bruise? I delivered the thing to the soft green strands, a wet place where it could burrow into the dark earth and find comfort. I hadn't meant to hurt my brother. So Lulu becomes famous over the course of about a year and travels vaudeville. But I wanted to give y'all Manhattan when she is famous. She's 16. It's 1884. She has committed a hoax. Basically, the whole world believes that she can conduct electricity with her fingers. The real Lulu Hurst, by the way, earned $250,000 in 18 months in the 1880s doing this. So we're in Manhattan. New York City, April 1884. Despite the rumors of aerial trains, our travel to New York City was no different than any other. The tracks lay on solid ground and the bridges were sturdy and metal and brick. Only birds and sky arced over our heads. Mama and I set out to stroll the famous Ladies' Mile in Gotham as soon as we'd seen our bags installed at the hotel. Stylish women and men deep in conversation with each other and occasionally with themselves flowed up and down the Broadway. A sign as tall as me reading, "We give trading stamps," filled a store window. There were stores for rugs, for tableware, for remedies, with nearly every window at least 2 stories high. The whole place clattered like a busy mind. Even for someone with money to burn, there was no reason on earth any items should cost what they did. Spoons had names like Eastlake and Orleans. Bars of soap from England cost more than a boxed lunch on a train. New Yorkers were gone suckers if they made a habit of spending that much. Mansions filled entire city blocks. One of these labyrinths of turrets and gables must have been where Mrs. Vanderbilt wore her electric light party dress. Somewhere in this city, maybe swarming around me this minute, were people who had been her guests. They were the same individuals who bought jewelry and silver tureens from stores that existed to sell these things only. Mama took my hand. We turned onto a side street in search of 6th Avenue and the elevated train. 1 block, then 2, and soon the 2 streets crossed, their rivers of people flowing together and separating again. In front of us stood a massive cage of iron struts, like the skeleton of a beast, and above us, rail tracks crisscrossed the sky. "We need to get back to the hotel," Mama said, fingering the new gold watch pin on her dress. Horse carts and carriage turned on 6th Avenue, past 6 and 7 stories of brick and stone. Between buildings pressed shoulder to shoulder, gold lettering juggled the sunlight over a recessed doorway. The gold spelled out, "Gaiety Dime Museum." Dime museums were all the rage with the adventurous types. They purported to house living human oddities, mermaid tails and dancing aborigines, grizzly bear feet, relics of the Holy Land and secrets of the deep. I'd learned this in Wilmington from Rosie, the 400-pound beauty, who dreamed of life as a mermaid with a merman husband. "But they have relics from the Bible," I said, pointing across the street to the gold letters. "Can't we just go in for 10 minutes? "I cannot imagine where you learned that," Mama said, but she plucked the admission fee from her purse as we dodged traffic. At the door, a skeletal fellow unfolded himself like a mantis to accept her coins and usher us through the dim vestibule. The overpowering smell of decayed mushrooms made me draw my sleeve to my nose. The place gave me the horrors in the best way possible. As my eyes adjusted to the darkness, a wall of glass-fronted cabinets took shape. While Mama bent low to read a wall card placed at the feet of a wax mannequin dressed as the Queen of England, I went to the cabinets and tried to make out the contents of a jug half the size of a barrel. Roots from a monstrous turnip waved dreamily from a milky fluid inside. Looking closer, I counted 20 fat fingers, 4 fat hands, and 4 slender feet. One oversized head wobbled above the mass on a thick yellow stem. Either side of the head had its own face. 2 sets of closed eyes, 2 button-sized flat noses, and 2 tiny mouths poised to suckle. 2 faces, 1 head. The card below the jar read, 2-faced baby, 1 body oddity, 2 entire sets of limbs, 2 personalities. I stumbled backward into a chatty man and woman, eyeing the next display. The fingers waving at me through the glass were real. The nails were like flecks of mica. The fat little arches of the feet were wrinkled. They curled in like potato bugs. 2 faces, 1 heart. How would someone make this object? Who would put it in a jar? I wondered if the baby had 1 brain or 2. As repulsive as the thing was, my throat caught with the desire to help it. If this child had been Leo, who by the way is fine, she didn't really hurt him, just as an aside, I would have smashed the glass and set him free. This baby might never have breathed a single minute, but what if I could captivate the thing until its eyes opened and it saw me? When I opened the baby's eyes, would its pain seep into me? If an entire twin self was removed this way, the 2 baby faces would be forever lonely, unable to see each other no matter how much they wanted to look into the eyes of the 1 person on earth who truly knew them. Weeping, I turned from the baby. Mama came up beside me, tapping her watch. My rest hour was looming, but I didn't want it. Before I could form an argument for skipping a single afternoon's confinement, the mantis man shouted, 12 o'clock show. A hurdy-gurdy player with a gyrating monkey came from the darkness, cranking out a tune. A sparse crowd jostled us into a makeshift theater, their anticipation sparking like the moments before a magnetic girl test. The flow of bodies into the little room lifted my heart. Pickled babies mattered not at all. The gas was turned up enough to reveal a woman wrapped in blue robes. She looked bored. A blue and gold banner whimpered, Madame Parnell and her tarot card for secrets of the ancient East. She knows what lies ahead. She had rimmed her eyes with lampblack. A deck of tarot cards fanned out on the lace cloth before her. Incense in brass pots sent ribbons of spicy smoke to the ceiling. No one would notice how she crossed her eyes just enough to melt us all into a blur, but I knew that routine like my own nose, and I did it 100 times better. She was dressed so much like the drawing on the cover of Modern Marvels of Alchemy that I bit my knuckle to keep from laughing. Even her turban had a green jewel above her forehead, undoubtedly a chunk of glass or worse, a sticky piece of candy. Who here is brave enough to allow Madame Parnell to see their future in her cards? The talker shouted. He looked at each of us accusingly, pointing like a child. He didn't have Daddy's finesse in calling out a mark. Daddy encouraged them, but this fellow aggravated people. He didn't seem to know that every member of an audience should want to be selected. You, or you, or you, sir. A girl behind me whispered, go on, but her fellow hushed her. The talker pointed at me. You, he said. I drilled my gaze into the talker's eyes. He must have recognized me. He'd probably seen my face on a broadside or read about me in a newspaper. They always ran lithos showing me lifting a fellow or doing the cane test or something they'd made up. Madame Parnell's cards will reveal everything about you, he crooned. Will your future be made from fire or water? If I were that 2-faced baby in a jar, one pair of my eyes would see backward to the Ladies' Mile. The other would stare through Madame Parnell and her curtain of incense to look directly at myself tonight on the stage at Wallach's Theater. I would have real curtains and a real piano player, and every seat in the gilt-edged opera house would be full. But I could only see the talker. All eyes in the theater burned into my back, my shoulders, my neck. I had taken the bait merely by coming in, making myself nothing more than any of the guileless, starry-eyed marks my father chose. I couldn't get out the door fast enough. The display room had gone completely dark, but for a sign reading, see the man eating chicken, under a window's light. I pressed my crawling back against the wall. My fingers fluttered and grabbed at my arms. Mama emerged from the theater looking like she'd eaten something rotten. You know better than to make a scene that way, Lulu. People laughed. If I opened my mouth to answer, I'd vomit. Focusing on putting one foot in front of the other, I accepted her grip on my wrist. Outside in the bright afternoon light, black electrical wires twisted above our heads, a contortionist act of their own. In some places, the wires interlaced so densely, they obscured the sky.
Wow, Jessica, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Beautiful. So many just like detail and setting upon detail and setting, but still moving the characters along and getting into their head too. Like,
Yeah.
really sets the tone for it. And it's such an I guess it's such an interesting setting too, as well. And I'm really sort of fascinated by this idea of someone who is maybe a higher level, I don't know what to call her. Like
Overall.
yeah, like a higher level, fake performer who's like sort of scoffing at the lower level ones. There's something about that that's very entertaining, and also sort of tells me a bit about her sort of aspirations and maybe how she'd like to think of herself, in a way that I think is really interesting.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, the pure curiosity of something, while we still have one in New York, we still have one actual thing that calls itself a freak show down in Coney Island.
Right.
It's mostly people who I would say are now, they do something that involves a talent rather than being born differently. But
Yeah.
there is something to that I find myself fascinated by, like, and just the, yeah, Trina just said in the chat, the babies in the jar will haunt me forever.
Yeah, I should have done a trigger warning on that it's a little gross.
No, that's totally okay. But there is something to that where, like, we human beings, one thing that is the same as it was in the, mid 19th century is that we are fascinated by the extremes of human form and behavior. We kind of can't help it. We try our best to not offend anybody or hurt anybody's feelings, but at the same time, we are sort of fascinated by it. And you can't help but, when you see something like that, think about, I guess the twofold thing of what if, if some by some chance someone in my life or myself was affected by something this profoundly, and then also what does that I lost the second one. That's okay. But I think the what if, what if that was me, or what if that was someone I know, versus
The part of the book is about is the female body a freak show? Who considers the female body a freak show?
Well, and I would assume that was a big thing at the time for a woman to be a performer in what is essentially a physical act, right?
Very much so. Yeah, very much so.
The question I always have for people who write things set in historical times, I just think, what was the research process like for this?
Oh my God. Very briefly, I can't turn this around and show you the closet, but there's an entire file cabinet. There's about 8 3-ring binders of everything from real vaudeville contracts to letters from this actual woman's actual father that I got in the Atlanta History Center, to my going to physically where her house was up in North Georgia, to walking downtown to where the theater was that she performed in Atlanta, which freakishly was on the same corner where my father's law office was 90 years later. Ooh, spooky. So a lot of stuff. And I love her dearly. She died 10 years before I was born, so I've never met her. But the research involved learning to do her, what she called tests, because it was more scientific than tricks. Some of them can't be done. They're complete bullshit. But the ones that I could figure out, I learned how to do.
That's fascinating. I think that's so interesting. All right. So the book is available now?
Oh, it's in paperback now. It came out last April, and the paperback book club edition is out now.
Excellent. There's a link to it in the chat, as well as where to catch Jessica on her website and on Twitter. So people, if you want to learn more, please do. I'm fascinated. I love a good
Nelly, I want to sign it for you. Thank y'all so much.
Yeah, thank you so much. So moving on. Thank you, Jessica. And we will wrap up tonight with our final reader, who is going to be Sue William Silverman. She is the award-winning author of 7 works of creative nonfiction and poetry. Her most recent book, How to Survive Death and Other Inconveniences. Just a quick aside, Sue's books have the best titles. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to harm any other writer's feelings, but I'm very impressed by the titles, and you'll see towards the end what I mean. That book, How to Survive Death and Other Inconveniences, was named one of the 9 essay collections feminists should read in 2020 by Bitch Media. Other nonfiction books include Lovesick, One Woman's Journey Through Sexual Addiction, which was made into a Lifetime movie, Because I Remember Terror Father, I Remember You, which won the Association of Writers and Writing Programs Awards. And then this is my personal favorite, the Pat Boone Fan Club, My Life as a White Anglo-Saxon Jew, and Fearless Confessions, a writer's guide to memoir. She teaches in the MFA program at Vermont College of Fine Arts. All right, Sue, you should be able to unmute and take us out.
Yes. Hi, everybody. It's so great to be here and such great readings. Thank you all. Yes, this is my new book, How to Survive Death and Other Inconveniences. And it's an essay collection. And sort of in addition to just being about my fear of death and wanting to survive it and exploring the origins of it, it's also kind of about how to survive more sort of emotional and spiritual kind of mini deaths, things like, divorce and addiction, loss. And I'm also a hypochondriac. And I'm going to read a part of an essay about that, and it's called The Safe Side. The triage nurse asks about my symptoms as I huddle at the ER registration desk. They know me well by now. Last night, I tell her I felt pressure against my heart and sweating. I don't tell her I feel fine now. Nor this morning do I even consider an appointment with my primary care physician. Test results as an outpatient take days. I want answers. I want them now. In the ER, you get instant gratification, even if the news is bad. 2 weeks to live. If last night's episode was a heart attack, it's apparently not life-threatening. Yet I swoon over the reception desk to appear frailer than I feel. This claim must seem legitimate. The word heart bumps me to the head of the line. The wide doors to the treatment rooms swing open. I change into a hospital gown, slide onto the bed, and describe the symptoms to a nurse. She checks blood pressure, pulse, temperature, all normal. In fact, my blood pressure is low. She attaches electrodes over my upper body for an electrocardiogram. Gooey patches dot my skin. She explains this shows the electrical activity of my heart. Impulses recorded as waves flow along a monitor if you are lucky. I press a finger to my chest, a gentle thrumming. I am not flatlining yet, but the overly processed air in the ER, the discordant noises, the flashing and beeping, the unrelenting fluorescent lights don't sound like the real world. I almost feel as if I died last night, halfway between awake and asleep, or not knowing the difference. And if it isn't a heart attack, how to interpret the mystifying message sent to me by my heart. Last night, I think a flutter in my heart awakens me around midnight. From the start, however, I'm confused by my lack of conviction or empirical evidence. Perhaps I haven't yet fallen asleep. Perhaps I'm in a state of semi-consciousness. Whether awake or not, this is what I feel, unless I hallucinated the entire episode. No, let me make one definitive statement. This is what happens. My skin sweats mildly. A thin pressure encapsulates my heart. The pressure deepens, but softly, as if a palm cradles it. Then, for a brief moment, the hand hugs it. This mental image is distinct. No arm is attached to the hand, only a portion of a nondescript wrist. Is the gesture meant to convey a farewell, a greeting, love, a subtle warning? In this quasi-conscious state, I am not scared. I passively accept this gesture, whether it's a vision, a dream, or something else. Then I fall asleep. In the morning, I remember the sensation. Now more alert, I want to understand. It felt good, but was it actually bad? A heart attack? Perhaps a metaphor? If so, for what? Another nurse pulls back the curtain encircling my bed. She's here to draw blood. Apparently, if the heart has been damaged, certain enzymes leak from it into your bloodstream. I imagine chartreuse-colored enzymes contaminating my veins because the word enzyme sounds chartreuse. I might be dying, so indulge me. She slides a needle into the crook of my elbow and fills vial after vial of blood. Next up is a chest x-ray. I worry about radiation, but at this point, I'm too far into the heart attack scenario to say, never mind. They maneuver my entire bed out the door, the aide soundlessly gliding me down one linoleum corridor and up the next. A breeze gusts my skin. I experience the sensation of floating through space. Who knows where I will land? I'm still here on Earth, however. The technician asks me to stand in front of the machine. When I ask what the x-ray might reveal, he replies, fluid in your lungs, also the size of the heart and the blood vessels. But won't the x-ray appear skeletal? I wonder, a vest of ribs protecting a defenseless heart. I want to ask the technician for a copy of the x-ray, a snapshot to be saved for a photo album. Not that I believe in ghosts or otherworldly creatures, but what if a hand has been dispatched to my heart with a message? I want to see it. I want to know the message. I'm wheeled back to my room, a double, which now contains another patient. A man coughs, spewing galaxies of germs into the air. I nod my head toward the man and ask the nurse for a face mask, the kind surgeons use to protect themselves from the common cold, Ebola, the plague. She sighs but gives me one. The man seems closer to death than I. The nurse must understand how hard I work on a daily basis, keeping it away. Why isn't everyone as vigilant as I? The ER doctor sits on a stool and scoots close to me. He wants to know my symptoms. What happened last night? I again explain the sweat, the pressure on my heart. He waits for me to say more. It was gentle, I say, friendly. I've never heard anyone describe a heart attack as gentle, he says, or friendly. Maybe it was a little heart attack, I say. I'm scheduling a stress test for you, he says, just to be on the safe side. But the ECG, the blood work, the x-ray, all are normal. He is not exactly unfriendly, but suspicious. Sometimes, people imagine things, he adds, especially when they are stressed. I want to tell him, of course I am stressed about dying. After all, I have been stressed, or so it seems, about dying since birth, if not before. Isn't he himself terrified by the sheer nothingness of it all? I also want to ask him if it could have been symbolic. Isn't it just as important to unravel the meaning of a symbol or a sign as it is to diagnose a physical symptom? Isn't there a test for that? And then I'm going to skip the part about the stress test, which of course I passed with flying colors. I'm actually fine. And then I'm going to pick up at the end. Sometimes people imagine things the doctor had said, but death is my obsession. I should have answered. I imagine everything, every possible kind of death, little everyday deaths, near deaths, death-defying deaths, emotional deaths, existential and metaphysical deaths, minor inconvenient deaths, pseudo deaths, final death. I need a system that ranks various deaths on a scale from 0 to eternity. After I return home, I Google symptoms for a gentle, friendly heart attack, which the doctors don't think I had in any event. I find sites that describe prolonged pain in the upper abdomen, shortness of breath, sweating, fainting, nausea, clammy skin, fatigue. Besides the sweating, which could be symptomatic of anxiety and stress, none of these descriptions fit me. Nothing about shadows or symbols. I must discover what it is. What other words pertain to the body to make it more of what it is, or more than what it is, keeping me on the safe side, the side of life. Thank you.
Wow, Sue, thank you so much.
Thank you.
That was incredible. It was an extremely relatable series of thoughts too. Maybe just me, maybe I don't know if I'm a hypochondriac. I do have fears about some medical stuff, but there was the relatable, the actual description of whatever sensation you know whatever that sensation you had was, but that's part of it too, like that feeling of I've had nights where I'm maybe anxious or I'm panicking or something, and I'm trying to go to sleep, and I think, oh, did my heart just stop for a second? What's going on? And then I always just sort of go like, I guess I just have to accept it, and I'll just go to sleep, and I kind of get into that weird zone. But the thing that I related to the most is just this desire to know what does it mean? What happened? Like what, and doctors, obviously, by the nature of their profession, are not inclined to talk to you about that. They're not interested in that. They're interested in sort of the mechanics and engineering aspects of a human body. And I think that's kind of what is so relatable. And I love just this continued sort of such a wonderful question as, is it a metaphor? And if so, what is it a metaphor for? Like, just that basically sums up my experience, at least, of human experience, of sort of like, what are the things that are happening around me about, and what are they doing? And I've never actually articulated it that way. And you wrote such a wonderful way into that, sort of through just like a very, very relatable and organic thought process. And also,
thank you.
Sure. And with a great sense of humor too. Because I think many people, would and I actually saw someone comment in the chat, I think someone you work with, about pushing deeper. I think it was Lisa.
Oh, Lisa. Hi,
Yeah.
Lisa.
And that's the thing, though, is like, a lot of people would not talk about this experience necessarily. They'd be like, well, I guess it was nothing. It's fine. I'll go home and I'll never mention it again. Whereas, for you to delve into it so deeply and write about it is really, again, sort of back to writing, allowing us to relate to others and have feelings and experience these things. Anytime I hear someone write something personal about a thing that most people wouldn't talk about, I'm always sort of in awe of this vulnerability, but such a confident vulnerability, in the sense that you sort of knew it was in the essay. At least you sort of understand that maybe you're being a bit silly at times.
Yeah. Well, parts of the book are, with the title, How to Survive Death and Other Inconveniences. It's sort of a giveaway. There's going to be a lot of irony in it. But the essays range. I mean, there are a lot of different voices. Some are kind of sadder, more, but others are, sort of highly ironic and kind of gallows humor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that's the thing, is death is a natural part of life, and it sort of does, whether we want it to or not. The fact that our life doesn't last forever colors most of our experience. So whether that's the funny stuff or the sad stuff, or the things that are really, really meaningful, or the things that are incredibly not meaningful at all, it's sort of all in there. So it sounds like a wonderful topic, and it sounds like you really got a chance to think through a lot of these things. So The book is available now. There's a link in the chat to the book, I believe, or to maybe it's your profile on bookshop.org, as well as a website and a Twitter. So thank you so much for coming and sharing that work with us. That was wonderful.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
All right. What a night. This was fantastic. Thank you all for coming. Just by way of wrapping it up, if you want to keep up with us, you can do so on the show has a Twitter account at TGIcast, but the easiest way is to go to tgicast.com. That will have a list of upcoming events, the writers and their bios as they get them to us, links to their websites and any other relevant information. And as I slowly solve my technological problems, two things. One is the video archive of shows is going up slowly, and you can find it on YouTube, but honestly, they just go onto our site too. So maybe that's the easiest way to do it. And then we have a podcast available as well, where I have done some more in-depth interviews with some writers. That's on Spotify. I have not been able to edit an interview that I did in October because of technical issues, but I will have hopefully 2 forthcoming as I solve these problems. Otherwise, you can find me on Twitter at Ridge Cresswell or on Instagram at Birdvert. It's like bird pervert. Don't ask, or just go find out. It's pictures of birds. I like it. You can find the show's creator, founder, spiritual pillar, curly-haired magical wizard, Trina Thibodeau, on Twitter at Trina Tibbs, TREENATHIBS. And you can find the show's talent booker, organizational force, and overall cool dude, Noli Reed, on Twitter at Noli Reed. And with that, as I think we said before the show, for those of you who were here, if you have someone you think might be a good fit for us, or you'd like to hear read, or if you yourself would like to share some of your work, Noli's the person to contact. She is the scheduler, and we really do appreciate recommendations. I saw in the chat today the chain of recommendations from a few people who have been told about the show by another person and another person and another person. And really, that's we're like a social network, but not in the social media sense. It's an actual social network. So if we're trying to build the biggest web we can. So please tell people about us, send people our way, come by whenever you can. And if there's anything we can ever do to help writers, artists, anything like that, we will do our best. As we like to say, this show runs on friendship. And with that, thank you guys so much. I'm going to stop recording, and then we can hang out.